Hi, if you are watching this video, it means that you are part of the 2 billion plus people who watch YouTube, and you are probably aware that these days a lot of videos on YouTube are advertisements. Based on a survey from several agencies, review that they are satisfied with the return on investment on video advertisement for more than 90%. So today we are going to talk about how to produce video advertisement with a low budget. I'm Dr. Sean Chaidarun, and today with me here I have my student Nathan Wee, who is not only studying communications and new media, but he is also running his own business called Fast Forward Media. Tell us a little bit more about your Fast Forward Media, Nathan.
Right, so Fast Forward Media is a video production company based here in Singapore, and it's a company that I've started. It's been around for about a year or so up to this point, and what we do is we do product advertisements, we do short films, we do a lot of different kinds of video production. The reason why I started this whole endeavor of starting a company and everything was because as a child I loved making videos and of all my travel experiences with my family. So this ability to capture the moment and play it back and see people smile when they watch it, that's something that has motivated me since then to create great videos and advertisements. Yeah, it's just a very meaningful thing for me, so that's what keeps me going for Fast Forward.
Thank you very much. That's very inspiring. Now, tell us a little bit about the journey after you received the brief from your client. What are some of the things that you have to take into consideration before you start shooting the advertising video?
Right, so that brief that the client gives you sometimes is the most important piece of document that you can ever receive. It outlines what the client wants to achieve with this video, what's their budget, who their audience is, and all these factors are things that need to be taken into consideration, especially considering which platform do I upload it on. So for example, things that I would take note of is definitely who is the audience. So like I mentioned earlier, who is the audience will determine what platform. These days TikTok is a very big platform that many advertisers are actually starting to look into more seriously. Previously, TikTok was kind of seen as just fast food content. People don't really take it seriously. But because of the virality of it these days, advertisers are really looking into it. So an audience, a specified audience, can really help you determine which platforms this video needs to go up on. Age group as well, that affects the way you angle the story of your advertisement. Younger people, you angle it completely different from how you would approach the older generation, for example. You may want to use different strategies, having that high impact at the start and then soften out towards the end, and that varies with any audience, every audience that the client gives you. And another important aspect of this brief is definitely what the client intends to achieve from this video. For example, some clients may want to have a CSR initiative, so corporate social responsibility, and the angle that they come from is they want to show themselves as being very responsible. So that angle completely varies from something else like I want to sell a product, for example. So the entire theme and idea and angle all depends on that brief. So it's a very important piece of document.
That's very interesting because whenever I teach advertising, I ask students to consider the objectives of the client, the target audience, and the platform that they will show their advertisement to the audience as well. So that being said, to create the meaningful advertisement, we have to get to know the basics, especially the basics of the cameras, the angles, and everything. Now let's talk about all these basics. What are some of the tips that you would like to give to people who will start producing advertisement for the first time using the video as the channel?
So when I was first starting out, there's so much to take into consideration. Camera basics is something that you really have to have nailed down, just the fundamentals. So what I can do is run through a few of these fundamentals, and hopefully it'll help people gain their foundation and then start making great videos. So first of all, what we want to talk about is exposure. So exposure refers to how bright an image is, and there are three main components that affect exposure in an image, and these make up what they call the exposure triangle, because each of these components will in some way or another affect the overall brightness of the image. So these three components are ISO, shutter speed, as well as aperture. So shutter speed is the rate at which the camera mirror opens, because in the olden days, you know, they used to have a shutter that goes up and down. So shutter speed determines how long of a time this mirror is open, and that determines how much light can enter the sensor. It used to be film, now it's all digital, so that determines how much light can enter the sensor. So the longer it's open, the brighter the image will be. The shorter the duration, the darker the image will be. So this tends to be measured in 1 over a certain amount, so 1 over 50, 1 over 250, it varies. So another component that we look at is ISO, and ISO determines how sensitive the sensor is to light around it. In the past, film, in the film context, the ISO was fixed on every roll of film that you put in the camera. But nowadays we have the luxury of digital cameras and everything, so we can adjust that amount based on what we want to see in the scene. So a higher ISO will be brighter because it makes the camera more sensitive to light, and a lower ISO will make it darker. But there is a bit of a caveat when it comes to this, and that is that the higher the ISO of the camera, the greater the amount of noise and grain, because it starts to become too sensitive to the light around it. So that's something that you also have to take note of. Yeah, the last component of the exposure triangle would be the aperture, and that is like an iris in the camera. That determines, it's like a hole, and then that determines how much light can enter the sensor. So this also determines something called bokeh, which many of you may know as that blurry thing behind the main subject that you see in films or photographs. So bokeh, it helps to isolate the subject from the background, and having the aperture wide open, so the iris wide open, helps to create this very nice blurry look behind. But do take note that the aperture, you don't always want to be shooting wide open, because sometimes you have big landscapes, sceneries. You don't need the background to be too blurry. You want to take in the entire context of the image. So that's when you use higher apertures. So yeah, these three components make up basic exposure for the camera, and it helps you to, and this hopefully will help you to understand a bit better how you can play around with the lighting in your scene a bit.
So the basic of the camera affects the way you create meanings in your advertisement, and that is one of the very basic things that we have to take into consideration. Keep in mind this word, exposure. Okay, now the next question I have is, how about the angle, the camera movement? In what ways those angles and camera movements create meanings for the advertisement and the moving image that people see, and how can we take control of that?
So for camera movements, we have things like static shots, handheld shots, push in, pull out, zoom in, zoom out, and all this helps to, it's like a filmmaker's toolkit, for example, in creating emotion in a scene. So for static images or static shots, that's usually put on a tripod. The camera's put on a tripod, and this helps to, in a way, take away from the camera so much. Like it focuses on the talent, the actors, and this is very common in conversation scenes where you have two people speaking to each other, and you don't want the camera, like moving around all over the place, distracting the audience. So that's a very important thing to remember as well. You don't want your camera movement to distract the audience. You want it to emphasize what's going on in the scene. So for greater emphasis, what you can do is actually a push-in shot. And what this does is it creates this feeling that you are moving towards the character. You're getting more emotionally involved with the character. So pushing shots, we use it in moments where you want to have the audience attached with the character in a scene. What are they feeling? What are they thinking? And conversely, we have the pull out shot. So pull out shots are when you move the camera backwards away from a certain subject. And what this helps the audience do is actually detach from the moment. From maybe a very intense scene, you want to start to detach from the moment, take a breather and everything. And this is when a camera can move back from a subject to reveal the surroundings around the person. So these combined with angles can create varying emotions in a scene. So for angles we have, for example, if you tilt the camera up towards the character or the talent, and you are looking up towards them, it creates this sense of dominance for the main character. It puts them in a stronger position. Versus if you were to point the camera downwards towards them, it belittles them in a way, it makes them feel small in the image. And this simple changing of angles helps to create this sense of power in the film or advertisement. But most of the time, for simple getting started, we should like to shoot at eye line, because that makes a very big difference to how the audience feels. Like when you're staring directly at a person, you want to be at their eye line. You don't want it to be a little too low, a little too high. Try to get it as much on eye line as possible. So yeah, this combined with movement creates a lot of emotion in scenes and really helps to tell your story.
Yeah, it reminds me of a lot of traveling vlog,
Right.
where people kind of like show their emotions on their face first, and then when they kind of like zoom out, people start seeing the surrounding or the environment.
Right, and actually another aspect, handheld shots. Most people think, why want to shoot handheld? It's so shaky and everything. But this creates a certain kind of documentary, I'm in the scene kind of feeling. And there's a place for that too in many films. In fact, actually, there are many Netflix series and shows like that actually have a handheld style camera that puts you in the scene. It makes you feel like you're there. So yeah, it's
very interesting. Now, how about yourself? Do you have any kind of signature angle of the camera that you prefer or you use a lot?
So, well, personally, I actually use tracking shots a lot. And what tracking shots are is when you follow a character with the camera, whether it's cars, whether it's people. I personally shoot cars a lot, so car tracking shots look great, especially when you're moving at speed. It gives people this sense of, wow, I'm moving with the car. It's an angle that you can't usually see. So tracking shots are my favorite, and even following people as well. It makes you feel like, oh, I'm on a journey with a certain person. Where's this person going to go?
When we do tracking shot, do we need a lot of fancy equipment? Because some people might worry that you need the gimbal or kind of fancy equipment to help you follow the subject.
Way back in the past, when I didn't have all the equipment that I have the luxury of using now, we would like get on a skateboard, for example, just run, like have someone push you on the skateboard and then have the camera, and then that kind of replicates the movement of doing tracking shots as well, especially when following a person. Other things that we did, we took trolleys, we'd sit inside trolleys and then like we'd hold the camera out of the trolley and people would push us. So I think a big aspect of filmmaking and doing advertisements is knowing how to improvise and working well with what you have. I mean, that's what we are here to share with people today, how to do this on a budget, and how you don't need the equipment to make a great film. And yeah, I mean, like the ways that I had to improvise in the past, nowadays they have those like sliders and everything. We used to like just take a piece of paper, put the camera on top and then just push the piece of paper across the table and things like that. So improvising, finding out what works for you, lighting even, you don't need big lights, expensive lights. You can use natural light coming in from the window, a white piece of paper to reflect the light off onto the person and things like that. So yeah, just explore, improvise. Don't be too worried about the equipment. The story usually matters more. In fact, actually, I would say the story always matters more.
That's a very good suggestion. And I even think that even the normal cell phone, mobile phone that people have these days, they have a pretty good function of a stabilizer, right? So if you walk around with the subject and turn on that stabilizing function, it works just fine.
Yeah, it's incredible what these phones can do. It's so scary. It's like all these phones, they have built-in stabilization. They can shoot 4K, they can shoot slow motion. The latest iPhones can even shoot this very advanced format called ProRes, and that's something that's only accessible, that only used to be accessible in high-grade cinema cameras and everything. So everything is getting shrunk down into your pocket, and there's even less and less excuse for, oh, I don't have the equipment, I can't make a film and stuff like that. Just go get out and do it. That's something that I think is very important. Don't worry about what equipment you have. If you have a passion for it, if you want to tell a story, just go out with your phone and then make something.